I've never cared for Land Rover's Range Rover Sport. The first generation, launched in 2004 as a 2005 model and codenamed L320, was little more than a rebodied Land Rover Discovery. I get the decision to build the thing, amortize the costs of developing the chassis with two vehicles, as well as expanding the Range Rover family. However, it wasn't nice to look at, and despite the word sport in the name, it wasn't in fact sporty to drive. The L494 second generation model was more handsome when it arrived in 2013, and it used the actual Range Rover platform. It was a bit sportier than the previous version, but every time I drove one, I came away with the distinct impression that it was a cost-cut Range Rover. Which of course, it was. Fast forward to now, and I've just driven multiple versions of the all-new, third-gen Range Rover Sport in and around Madrid, Spain. Is this one better than before? Range Rover has entered the polishing icon stage of design. Think Porsche and the 911. You want anyone looking to know the car's a Porsche 911 from 1,000 feet, so don't change too much. It's difficult for the layman, and challenging even for the car obsessed, to tell the newest Range Rover apart from the one that came before. Icon, polished. However, although the new Range Rover Sport is obviously related to the L494, it looks so much better. I'll even go so far as to say that the Sport looks better than the actual Range Rover, something that's never been true before. There's just this terrific gangster lean to it, along with subtle curves and a squashed, sloping fast roof that helps to show off the rig's tremendously well-formed shoulder and belt lines. Honestly, the roofline reminds me of the pre-war Bentley Gurney nutting blue train car. Love it. The Firenze Red Range Rover Sport P5 31st Edition I drove on day one, so named because the lovely BMW-sourced V8 engine makes 530 PS, or 523 horsepower, rode on 23-inch wheels and tires, and they looked smashing. Big wheels always run the risk of dwarfing the vehicle, and killing ride quality, more on that in a bit, making it appear smaller than it is. Not here. No, on the new Range Rover Sport, the big wheels simply work. A Scottish friend of mine commented that the front end looks like a Kia Soul EV. I told him Kia wishes that were true, and pointed out the Sport actually resembles a sporty version of the new Range Rover, with a bit of velour mixed in for good measure. The rear end is simply outstanding, avoiding the form fussiness that plagues the backside of Big Bro Range Rover. The quad pipes look good, and having the words Range Rover in black on a black strip shows that the brand is so confident in its design language it feels the SUV needn't be ostentatious. The cabin is Scandinavian in its sparseness, though the leathers are soft, thick, and plush enough that it somehow also feels like an old English wingback chair. Yet somehow sporty, too. I like the secondary fabrics on the door cards and seats, didn't mind the chopped carbon fiber accents on the first edition, and dug the open pore what I experienced in the P400 SE Dynamic. Most of the controls are found within the quick-acting touchscreen. However, and notably, there's a terrain response control knob that lets you quickly and easily toggle through the various off-road modes. I say notably because with the otherwise wonderful Land Rover Defender, the terrain response controls are buried in the screen. This solution, which was first reintroduced on the Range Rover, is far better. I found the seats quite comfortable, though rear legroom is a touch lacking. That said, the rear seat fully reclines, should you so wish. Also worth mentioning, wireless CarPlay is now standard. Amazon Alexa is in there, too. Perhaps most important, every module in the Range Rover Sport is now able to be updated over the air. I'm not just talking infotainment here. I mean everything, from CarPlay integration to engine programming, hybrid system tuning, suspension setup, and even the steering. On the P530, it's that great 4.4-liter BMW N63 twin-turbo V8 that produces 553 pounds-to-foot of torque to go with the aforementioned 523 horses, the same specs as you'd get in a BMW X5 M550i. You may be thinking something along the lines of, why doesn't Land Rover just stuff its own V8 in there? A couple of reasons. The first is that ye old supercharged Landy V8 has about as much chance of passing Euro 6 emissions as Pete Davidson does avoiding shooting his shot with a female celebrity. Forced, terrible metaphor notwithstanding, the ultimate reason is Jaguar Land Rover, like the rest of the biz, is going electric. Instead of spending precious R&D dollars on a new V8, it's better to simply partner with a company that's already done the heavy lifting and concentrate on electrification. Also, you can expect a fully electric Range Rover Sport in 2 years' time. The P510e Autobiography and the P440e Autobiography are both plug-in hybrids that feature the brand's Ingenium 3.0-liter turbo inline-6 hooked to a 141 horsepower electric motor that's fed from a 39 kilowatt-hour battery pack. The more powerful P510e produces 503 horsepower and 516 pounds-to-foot of torque, whereas the P440e gets by with 434 horsepower and 457 pounds-to-foot. The only difference between the two vehicles is the output of the inline-six. Land Rover is hoping the Range Rover Sport P440e will get an electric-only mileage rating of 51 miles from the EPA. We should hear by the time the vehicle goes on sale in October. Your mileage may be better than rated, however, as Land Rover claims test vehicles are returning anywhere from 60 to 70 miles of pure EV range. We Yanks are also getting the P400 SE Dynamic and P360 SE, both of which sport only the Ingenium 6-banger, good for either 395 horsepower and 406 pounds-to-foot in the former or 355 horsepower and 369 pounds-to-foot in the latter. All power plants route their output through the ubiquitous for a reason. It's great, ZF 8-speed automatic transmission and onto all four wheels, permanent style. The hybrid motor sits between the engine and transmission, in a pancake arrangement. The auto is hooked up to a transfer case with low gears. Like all Range Rovers, the fancy off-road electronics suite is called Terrain Response, technically Terrain Response 2, and features several different off-road driving modes: general driving, grass, gravel, snow, mud, and ruts, rock crawl, sand, and wading. However, the system defaults to auto, the idea being based on what the tires are sensing. The computer will automatically choose the right mode to be in. For modes like rock crawl, the air suspension raises the vehicle even higher, creating yet more ground clearance, while rear-wheel steering makes the Range Rover Sport more nimble both off and on road. Yes, very. Especially the P530. That holds true even when compared to the larger, heavier, statelier Range Rover. Based on experience in the full-bore P530 SWB Range, the lighter, by around 500 to 600 pounds, according to LR's numbers, but identical output Sport actually does feel sportier to drive. Acceleration is brisk enough, and although it's refined and quiet most of the time, flipping the P530 into Sport mode provides a nice little V8 rumble. I also like how the Range Rover Sport rears up on its haunches a touch when you floor it. About 30 miles outside of Madrid, a semi-truck decided I wasn't there, and at 85 miles per hour I was forced to make what a driving school would term an emergency lane change. Didn't even freak my poor passenger out as she saw the truck trying to merge into our right front fender. This Range Rover Sport handles. On a more winding road, I found myself impressed with how the Range Rover Sport P530 tackles corners. No drama is perhaps the best way to describe the experience, and that means that even if you push this SUV hard. Our European Bureau Chief, Angus Mackenzie, has decried the on-center feeling of the Sport, saying the off-center effort is too heavy to be on anything badged a Range Rover. I didn't mind the effort and thought it was a nice differentiator between the Range Rover and the Sport. The more sporting rig is also lovely and graceful to drive at a modest pace. Speaking of graceful, I'm shocked by the ride quality. Based on the massive 285/40 or 23 tires on all four corners, I was expecting a harsh experience. The opposite turned out to be true. The Range Rover Sport is almost as cosseting and luxurious as it is fun to drive. The brakes work well, the transmission remains the best automatic in the business, and I'm really struggling to find any aspect of the Range Rover Sport P530 I didn't enjoy. I suppose I didn't look at the fuel economy, which is no doubt not very good. Back to the important stuff, is this the best driving Land Rover product ever? I'll go ahead and say yes. The other powertrains? Among the plug-ins, I only drove the P510e Autobio, the one we're not getting in America, but it's the only PHEV Land Rover brought along. However, it weighs exactly the same as the P440e Autobiography we are getting, which will have 69 fewer horsepower and 59 fewer pound-to-foot. Land Rover says these models weigh about 500 pounds more than the P530, and you can feel the extra weight in the handling. Still good to drive,